begins to move into failure. And they're just too lazy to apply themselves to making the hard choices and leading in a way that will help an organization succeed. They harm themselves and others. Interestingly enough, Proverbs chapter 13, verse 20, probably some of you have memorized this when it says that he who walks with the wise will grow wise. This was one of those verses that we had our kids memorize, and I point to Mo there, sorry, just because I can remember it. About her age, this was one of the most important verses that we had our kids memorize, because she's starting, and our kids were starting into that teen time period when all of a sudden your friends become highly intelligent and your parents become stupid. You remember that phase that you go through? All of a sudden your parents don't know anything and your friends understand you and know everything. And this passage says, he who walks with the wise, with the truly wise person who is reverent towards God, respectful towards others, you will grow wise if you'll walk with that kind of person. But a companion of fools, Kasil, suffers harm. And the gregarious, fun-loving, partying, irresponsible type person seems real appealing at that age when you're not sure that you really want to, that you want to, or that you're ready for hard responsibilities of life. So it's very attractive to circle yourself with Kasil friends. And the scripture says if you do, you're just going to harm yourself and others around you. Typically, they'll blame God and others for their problems, even when it's their own folly that leads to their ruin. And whenever they're honored and elevated, do you know that feeling when somebody gets that promotion or they get honored in front of a group of people and you know what their life is really like? They really lack credibility. They don't have respect among their closest coworkers, and yet somehow they get this award or this honor, or they get put in this position that recognizes them in front of others. And typically what happens is they embarrass everyone who puts them into that position, because they'll spout folly. They'll spout their own foolish ideas, and they're committed to that, and they'll say things and do things that people will regret that they elevated them to that position of honor. Okay, so how do you relate to a person who is a hopeful fool? And again, let me just underscore that even though these may seem like hard things, it's ultimately about loving the person. If you really want to love people who are into foolish patterns of behavior, you need to understand some things about how to relate to them based on their folly. And one of those things is Proverbs 14:7 says, you need to avoid this kind of a person. To put some distance between your life and theirs. That doesn't mean that you don't live redemptively towards them, that you don't communicate concern for them, that you don't pray for them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about mixing your life up with them in such a way that it's going to bring harm to you and others. So you maintain a healthy distance. We call it, in our generation now with the writing of Cloud's book, boundaries. You know, it's just putting necessary boundaries around you and your household in relationship to this person who is exhibiting a commitment to a foolish way of life. You don't enable them. You don't dish out the money. That's the mistake that this sister was making in the movie, is every time she had the next big idea or the next problem, she's just handing her money. And she's enabling her to continue in these patterns. You can't do that with a fool. You're not loving them. You're not helping them. And so, avoid them and their schemes. Don't get sucked in to their schemes and their ideas and the latest thing that they're wanting you to jump in on, because it's going to be that golden egg that leads you into the lifestyle of the lottery win. And don't teach them. This is an interesting thing. The scripture says, don't put yourself in a position of trying to teach a person in this place of folly. And I struggle with that, because I think, well, I want them to know the truth. But see, you have to realize they don't want to know the truth. Right now, they're not in a position that makes them teachable to the truth. So it doesn't mean, again, that you don't witness about Christ or share testimony of your own life, but typically what you'll find is they'll interrupt you and they'll have their own story about, what the latest thing is that's meant something for them, and really they pay very little attention to the advice that they're given. So again, don't avoid witnessing or sharing truth or but if you make it your intent that I'm going to teach them, I'm going to show them the way, I'm going to walk alongside them and be their mentor, you're setting yourself up for tremendous heartache, Because you know the group of people that most often get sucked into this and get hurt and damaged the worst? Which group of people around this person's life get hurt the most? Their parents. About 8 different times, the proverb says that there is no joy for the father of a